Lake Chilwa is located in the center of low-lying Chilwa-Palombe Plain in the southern part of Malawi and is shared between Malawi and Mozambique. It is the second largest lake in Malawi and the 12th largest natural lake in Africa. It is an enclosed and shallow basin with depths not exceeding 6 meters. The lake's size varies according to the amount of rainfall and water flowing into the basin. According to water experts, Lake Chilwa level changes take two forms, namely seasonal and periodic, when the lake dries up completely in some years, called a minor recession, approximately every 6 years, and a major one about every 25 years. This lake, for the first time in memorial, has been functioning as a shallow inland drainage basin. In 1997, the wetlands of the Biosphere Reserve were designated a Ramsar site due to their global significance as a major water flow habitat.
Lake Chilwa has been for a long time of interest to the University of Malawi, in particular the Department of Biological Sciences at Chancellor College. I remember in the early 70s there was a program on Lake Chilwa, and there is actually a whole book that was published somewhere around the middle of 1970s that had to do with the ecology of the whole lake. And we had a number of people cooperating in producing this book, like the social scientists, the hydrologists, and the ecologists, and the botanists, and the zoologists. And they produced a very comprehensive document that was mapping out how the various biological units in the Lake Chilwa were actually important in getting the lake to be alive. And I've also been aware and also perhaps participating, like in the 1996 when Lake Chilwa became a Ramsar site. It was actually the Department of Biology that was doing the studies, and together with the national parks, to look at Lake Chilwa and then whether it was qualifying to be designated as a Ramsar site, which is a very important international recognition. That happened. And then there have been a lot of other things that have happened since then, notably the coming in of the Danida project. The Danida project was a project that was in the somewhere around 2000. They had a very big project on Lake Chilwa, and this was meant to actually map out what are the problems in Lake Chilwa, and how do we look at strategies of addressing things in Lake Chilwa. So it was divided into two: the Lake Chilwa proper, that is the land, and then the upper catchment. And I think that was an important consideration, because when you are talking about the lake, we're actually talking about water coming from somewhere, and the water comes from the catchment, and that's the Zomba mountain and the surrounding mountains, as well as the mountains in Mozambique. And so the recognition of Ramsar site, it's of international importance. So it is up to us as a nation, and including the local scientists as well as the communities, to manage this appropriately.
All the significance of Lake Chilwa is now being threatened due to human activities that have been practiced over the years, more especially to the catchment areas of the rivers, which get their waters to this inland drainage Lake Chilwa. There are no longer fishery activities on the lake, and it has completely dried, as evidenced by these trucks and people walking on the lake bed from various places, such as Chisi Island to Kachulu Beach in the area of Traditional Authority Mwambo in Zomba. High population density A degraded environment and effects of climate change in Lake Chilwa Basin are causing flood insecurity and exerting increased pressure on forests and fisheries, which provide important sources of income and critical safety nets for the poor in times of crisis. Dr. Sambo therefore commends the introduction of leadership in environment and development under the University of Malawi in coordinating activities that have been happening in the Lake Chilwa Basin. The coordination has provided opportunities for academic studies and identification of solutions to ending environmental challenges that have been taking place in the basin.
Of most recent significance is the coming in of the leadership for environment and development. This has been a landmark development because what has happened is that the whole of the Lake Chilwa area has now been put as a whole ecosystem, all the way from the catchment, that is the Zomba Mountain and surrounding areas, and to the lake itself. And the leadership for environment and development has been instrumental in now linking the livelihoods of the people and what happens in research. It's actually action research, having this objective of saying, okay, if we're talking about environmental problems, what are the priorities? And what do we do about those priorities? And how do we actually reach the people so that the people can participate? And so it has been a very good development. And recently a book has been published about the whole of what LEAD has been doing in promoting the communities to participate.
This conference has been organized by all stakeholders concerned with activities surrounding Lake Chilwa. Members have been discussing strategies to developing sustainable fishery activities and how to improve the standards of living of people who basically depend on the Lake Chilwa for survival. Intermittently, the lake has undergone 12 severe recessions recorded in the following years: 1879, 1900, 1914 to 1915, 1922, 1931 to 1932, 1934, 1954, 1960 to 1961, 1967, 1973, 1995, and 2012. 3 of these were complete dry-ups in 1934, 1967, and 1995. And the one in 2018 is most recent, which has prompted stakeholders to conduct a serious searching to help millions of people cope up with the situation.
The future for the basin is bleak if certain things are not put in place. The main problem of the basin is the catchment destruction. So currently there is no water that is going to the lake, and in most cases the lake is now silting. I think that's a fact. And if you have been very observant, I think with very, very little rainfall, you find the lake, it looks full. But it's basically because it's now shallow and water is just spreading. So if we want to move forward, basically, I think we need to follow back to what we has been doing in the lake, following the Lake Chilwa Climate Change Adaptation Program as a model. So that's the ecosystem-based management. We need to look at the whole catchment from the upland. Our forests, our catchment areas need to be rehabilitated with a lot of trees. And the farming along the river banks, I think that has to stop without any mercy. It has to stop. And actually, if we go back to the lake, the management systems of the fisheries, but also Lake Chilwa was a very, very good environment in terms of protecting itself. So the Lake Chilwa had a lot of taifa, these grasses around the lake, and all that is gone. We need to bring that back. So that one was basically a natural means of trapping the silt. So if we don't maintain that catchment again, that band of taifa or the grass, then I think the Lake Chilwa will continue drying. So going forward, I think we need to move as a unit, moving from the catchment, from the district assemblies, district councils, chiefs, different departments of government, not only fisheries. We need water, we need agriculture, we need wildlife, we need lands, we need everybody to move as a unit on the protection of Lake Chilwa.
Indeed, the movement going forward has to incorporate everybody in managing the basin, beginning with those living within the basin and those living in the catchment areas of rivers that flow into Lake Chilwa from all surrounding districts. Director of Chiefs in the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, Charles Tombozi, observes that Lake Chilwa is the most significant physical feature found in Zomba, Palombe, and Machinga, which has to be jealously guarded and protected.
The first thing that a team at the district level has to do is to understand the real livelihoods of the people of that particular area. So I gave in the example of Tiolo, because for the Tiolo people, you're talking of the bananas. If we don't bring back the bananas, then the council hasn't done a good job for the Tiolo people. Likewise here in Zomba, Palombe, and Machinga, it's the issue about Lake Chilwa, because their biggest livelihood comes out of the lake. That's the fish. Now that the lake has actually dried up, it's a big issue. It's a big issue twofold. One, we are looking at the period, because in 2012 we had a similar scenario where the lake dried up, and this is 2018. We are again in the same situation. Now, if you go back to history, you discover that it was taking almost 25 or 40 years before the lake would actually dry. Now, it means the problem is actually being compounded now by the activities that are actually happening around the basin. And most of those things are to do with the environmental degradation, but also we are looking at the climate change issues that are actually taking place around the world, but now they are significantly having an impact on the Lake Chilwa.
Tombos adds that traditional chiefs whose areas surround the lake have an important role to play in ensuring that all activities are aiming at protecting Lake Chilwa, because it is a lifeline to most of the people in the basin.
The entry point is a chief, because we want to target the communities, and the communities are actually led by the chiefs. Now we bring the chiefs, one, that they should give their own input. Two, they're the ones to take the messages back home to make sure that the people at home are actually taking heed of what will be agreed around here.
In the country's decentralization, the beach village committees, BVCs, composed of all people engaged in fisheries-related activities on a beach, fall under the lowest decentralized structures, the VDCs. The Village Development Committees. These village development committees are chaired by traditional authorities, and here in the Lake Chilwa Basin, all tradition leaders are actively taking part in preserving pools that have the remaining fish.
If it meant out in Dumfi, kama kunu ndapeza bangu, kwa tugendi Dumfi, njeza. Musie njeza umene uzateteza mazi pobwera ndi matope. Mukangosesa njeza umene ndikutipula apo muononga. Mwatani? Mazi achazatenga matope ndikukasiya njama sumba za tamu. Tikwere papiri mitengo tiisamalire. Ana ali kusukula achazaiziwe kuti tengo ndo wanyenyeva, tengo ndo amapapaya, wakano waujeni, wamatowi, mapoza, imini tikali ya kale. Kwa soti kangosesa ndikuota moto.
Fish Project, working under pact with financial assistance from USAID, is increasing social, ecological, and economic resilience to climate change and improving biodiversity conservation through sustainable fisheries co-management in the Lake Chilwa Basin, among other areas. Through Fish Project, communities are able to care for their ecosystem, which supports lives of tens of thousands of households that rely on the lake for nutrition and income.
We have seen the opportunities in the Lake Chilwa Basin disappearing because of the drying of the lake, and basically what we have been doing is to build the capacity of the people to adapt to these impacts and increase their resilience. So the thrust has been on improving agricultural productivity through climate smart agriculture technologies, improving productivity of the irrigation schemes, and also reducing the amount of water which is used in the irrigation schemes, so that there is more water available for the lake, as well as improving forest regeneration, so that the water towers are able to store water and maintain flows to the lake. But unfortunately, some of the events which occur because of activities outside our influence, the impact of El Nino on rainfall also cannot be addressed with these local impacts. But our efforts have been on addressing those impacts which we can address within the catchment.
Fisheries Integrated of Society and Habitants is also working with communities in the Lake Chilwa Basin to preserve the remaining fish in the deep pools. These deep pools are found along the rivers that empty their waters to Lake Chilwa. Some of the rivers that Fish Project is working, including Domasi, Likangala, and Mulunguzi.
For this year, the lake is completely dry. But since the project started, we learned from the past. So we trained the river village committees, because the rivers, although they stop flowing, they still have what we call deep pools, which, if well managed, store the fish, which when it rains repopulate the lake.
Department of Forestry has played an integral part in the management of Lake Chilwa Basin. The department has been involved in planting trees in reservoir catchment.
What the drying of the Lake Chilwa has shown us is that we have damaged the catchment. The Lake Chilwa gets its water from the catchment, which is a number of hills all over the various districts, and those have been damaged. So what's happening is that instead of water flowing slowly to fill up the lake, it's just running. It's just going, and then evaporation takes place. So as a department, our role is to educate the people around that for us to avoid future occurrences of this nature happening too often, we need to take care of the catchment.
Department of Forestry is worried with the continued disregard of cutting trees for charcoal in many areas in this country. The Department of Forestry is proposing stiffer penalties to those who are illegally practicing charcoal business in this country.
The penalties are very small. For example, most courts will penalize somebody with 20,000 kwacha, or even they will just give you a warning. But the new law which we are coming up with, which we are proposing and is being worked on, is going to give heavy penalties. For example, you could be fined 1 million or even more than 1 million kwacha for being found in possession of charcoal without a license, or for being found making charcoal without a license. Vehicles that are carrying charcoal without permit, they will be penalized and could be impounded permanently when this law passes.
The Lake Chilwa Recession meeting held in Zomba has been motivated by what has happened with the lake in 2018. Under the auspices of the Department of Environmental Affairs, Malawi Environmental Endowment Trust, and United Nations Development Program UNDP, this meeting has brought together experts, researchers, scientists, and members from local communities within the basin.
If we consider the drying itself, it means that most of the fish within the lake have been decimated. But they will survive in pools that still exist within the lake, but also along the rivers, so that when it starts raining, then the fish can swim back into the lake and start breeding. So there are beach village committees where government and communities work together. I think the role of the chiefs is very important to make them understand that they have to at least hold on to the fishing until there's a signal that the fish are recovering. But also part of the problem that delays quick recovery is the fact that people are using illegal fishing gears. And these are use of mosquito nets, but also the massive chopping down of the aquatic vegetation within Lake Chilwa. Lake Chilwa is different from Lake Malawi in that Lake Chilwa does have a lot of aquatic vegetation, and it is where the fish breed but also escape from predation. And as we noticed during this period of drying, and like the drying episodes in the past, this vegetation has been decimated greatly due to cultivation, but also using the vegetation for other household use. So again, that one requires the role of the communities that are involved in the management of the lake.
The effects of complete recession of Lake Chilwa in 2018 have affected millions of people, not only those that are found in the basin. Chain of business activities ranging from fisheries to groceries have been affected in a big negative way, considering income that used to be generated previously.
It appears that it is a local problem, but it's not a local problem. Those people that have lost their livelihoods have actually left. Some have gone to Mangochi, others in town here in Zomba, others in Blantyre. Those that haven't left have found alternative coping strategies which are not sustainable. So there are those that are producing charcoal from an already fragile ecosystem. And particularly it also has a gender dimension, because most of those that have left are actually men, so they've left their wives and children behind. So it impacts the affected people locally in many ways, but also as a nation we get impacted directly or indirectly, because like here in Zomba we rely on fish from Lake Chilwa, but even in Blantyre. So, and then of course, if you look at the fish alone, the income generated is 18 to 19 million US dollars in a year. And so this year the zero, from 18 million US dollars. And you can just imagine that the income that has been lost. And this plays out through the whole chain. There are the fishermen themselves, the transporters, the processors, everybody is actually affected, and that's where this 18 million would have been distributed. So in essence, these people are looking to government or other organizations for their livelihood when they would have been independent.
The Department of Fisheries closes the lake for 3 months from 1st December to 28th February for fish to multiply freely. But in December 1st, 2017, Department of Fisheries agreed with local beach committees to ban fishing from February 2018 to 1st March 2019, when they expect the water to rise again. This is a desperate measure because fisheries' livelihoods are devastated. Equally fragile are livelihoods of people near Lake Malawi, Lake Malombe, and Lake Chilwa. According to the Fisheries Department, they produce almost 90,000 tons of fish per year, almost 70% of animal protein for almost 17.7 million people in this country.